Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orphanlast, aka Skylar Madison, and today we're going to look at the latest version of OTX. And we'll be covering some of the things that I covered from my first OTX video, and I'll be covering the newest features of OTX as well. And a link to where you could download the new OTX version will be supplied in a link in the video description below. Now, once again, you can see that on the startup pop-up, on the bottom right hand corner of the pop-up, there's a field where you can set the autosave settings right there. Now, I've already messed with the layout of OTX here, and just like with the last one, when you first open up OTX, you should right-click here and toggle the Xsheet Toolbar, because it's invaluable. And you'll notice there's a new icon here to the right of the Xsheet Toolbar. I'll get into describing what that icon does in a bit. First thing that's been changed up quite a bit is the style editor. You can turn everything off just by clicking on these buttons here at the top. The opacity bar has been relabeled from matte to alpha so that the terminology is more in line with the majority of other programs out there on the market. For the longest time, if you've wanted to keep your style editor out, it's been strictly designed to have a vertical layout. So if you click on the button to the far upper right, you can set it to have a horizontal layout. This way, you can snap it to the bottom of the screen if you'd like. Since it's a new feature, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use it, it just means that you have more choices available for your workflow. Personally, I think I'll be using the horizontal layout, or just opt for not keeping the style editor out 100% of the time. To me, it's not a necessity that it be out all the time, because you can just double click on a style and it'll pop up automatically. Once again, we have the My Paint brushes. So I go ahead and make a raster level so that I can access them. Once I select that raster level, you'll notice there's less tabs on the style editor in order to get to the My Paint brushes. So here I open up the 1.1.3 Morevna edition and go to the style editor so that we can compare the two style editors. So first off, here you can see that OTX's opacity is labeled alpha, and Morevna's and GitHub's is currently labeled as matte. A lot of people have found the term matte confusing, so this is a good OTX change. Now inside of the GitHub and Morevna edition, the tabs at the top of a raster level selected, there's plain, texture, special, custom, vector, My Paint, and settings. That's 7 separate tabs. It tends to get cluttered after a while. But here in OTX, there's less tabs. There's color, texture, vector, raster, and settings. So in OTX, we currently have 5 tabs at the top, and this reduces the clutter, and it does so rather elegantly. If you click on raster, you'll find that the My Paint brushes are there. If you click on settings, you'll be able to control various My Paint brush behaviors as shown in the footage on the screen right now. Now, this settings tab does exist currently in the 1.1.3 Morevna edition. I've just never talked about it in the past. So just like the 1.1.3 Morevna edition, if you click on the Xsheet button on the Xsheet, it turns your Xsheet into a horizontal timeline. By and large, your workflow is the same with the horizontal timeline, but the location that you need to snap it to on the screen needs to be in a horizontal location, such as either the top or the bottom of the screen. Just like with the last OTX version of the level strip, if you draw out your first level and then click on the level strip and press the down arrow key on your keyboard, you're able to draw your second level. Now, when you click on the level strip, you'll notice that the context of the scene will disappear, and it'll all be replaced completely with a gray background. All that will remain is the drawing that is specific to that level. This is normal when you're animating strictly on the level strip. And all you need to do is press the down arrow key, draw your picture, press the down arrow key, draw your next picture, and repeat, repeat, repeat. You can get a whole animation done this way. Personally, I haven't done much animating while using the level strip. However, with the vector brush's frame range capabilities in OTX, I can see myself using the level strip more and more often, especially when the next GitHub version comes out and when it has this feature. I still don't see myself using OTX regularly, and that's fine because it's just an experimental version anyways. But for right now, it's primarily because if you click on an empty level strip, you'll crash OTX every single time. I'll show that to you guys later. So here, I'm doing a little speed animation with the level strip, just drawing each level and pressing the down arrow key for each new level. Now, I stopped the speed animation so that I can demonstrate something. With the current 1.1.3 GitHub and Marevna versions, if you wanted to select multiple levels on the level strip, you've needed to click on the first level that you want selected, hold shift, and then select the last level that you want selected. Then you need to actually keep the shift button held down and then click and drag the levels onto your Xsheet. There's nothing wrong with that method. It still works in OTX. However, you can just click and drag in order to select multiple frames in OTX, and you don't need to necessarily hold shift down in order to successfully drag these levels into the Xsheet. Also, notice that while I'm in the level strip, if I zoom in on the picture I'm drawing, the level that I'm on has this little red box, and that little red box represents your screen. So this makes it so that the level strip functions as a navigator while working in the level strip, and you can just pan it around on a level just clicking down on the middle mouse key. Just a few days ago, I was tutoring someone in a screen capture, and they were fairly new to the program, and they were asking for a navigator, asking if it even exists. But I do see a valid reason for the navigator on the level strip, because once you click from viewing your artwork on the Xsheet, and then you click onto the level strip, it always seems like the drawing just teleports someplace else, and it can take a little bit of time to get your bearings and find out where everything is. And once again, you just middle click on the selected level to move the navigator around. So I continue my speed animation, and at the end we'll have a wavy little flower in a really crappy animation. I select these two columns and put them into a sub Xsheet. Then I enter into the sub Xsheet using the Xsheet Toolbar. You'll notice that we can't see the context of the scene once we enter into the sub Xsheet. We can only see what's inside of the sub Xsheet once we enter into the sub Xsheet. So if you need to see the context of the scene, you can click on this new icon on the Xsheet, which is the toggle edit in place button, which is really helpful, especially if you have a character in a sub Xsheet and he's interacting with things outside of the sub Xsheet. So here I demonstrate just how far the toggle in place button goes. So I go ahead and draw a stick figure doing a really crappy walking animation. I then parent the body to the legs together. Now notice that now the edit tool is called the Animate Tool. In the 1.1.3 GitHub and Marevna versions, it's been called the Edit Tool ever since OpenToonz was first launched. Personally, I feel as though this is a good change because it's not like you're actually editing anything with the Edit Tool. It's animating things. It should be called the Animate Tool, as it's now currently labeled inside of OTX. And calling it the Edit Tool confuses people into thinking that when they scale an object up or scale an object down with the edit tool, they think that they're actually scaling it up, when what they're actually doing is animating it. This makes things extremely difficult if you're trying to create a mesh or a skeleton to a cutout animation and you're adjusting the size of variously different body parts with the edit tool. Things just will not match up. Not only this, if you wanted to use the keyboard shortcut for the eraser tool with the 1.1.3 GitHub and Marevna editions, you'll need to press the A key in order to access the eraser, while in most programs you'd press the E key. So calling the edit tool the Animate tool makes it so that when you press E, you select the eraser, and when you select A, you're selecting the edit tool, or what's now called the Animate tool. But let's get back into talking about this stupid stick figure animation that I'm creating that resides within a sub Xsheet right now. So with the newly named Animate tool, I animate him walking across the screen and put the stick figure man's body and legs into a sub Xsheet while I'm already inside of a sub Xsheet. So essentially, without a better term to call it, I just created a sub Xsheet. So I enter into the sub Xsheet and I use the toggle edit in place button, and I can see directly into the Xsheet, the sub Xsheet, and the sub Xsheet. So this is just how far the toggle in place toggle button on the Xsheet toolbar goes. I really like this toggle edit in place button because in the past, if you've wanted to access the edit in place option, you'd have to access one of the menus and read through a list to find it, and that just slows down the workflow, whereas a button is so simple, even a small child could do it. So let me go ahead and show you drawing substitution. I select frame 6 on the Xsheet, and the level number on the cell on the Xsheet is 6. But once I press the Q or W keys on the keyboard, I'm changing which level appears on the Xsheet without having to do a bunch of activity with the mouse. Not only that, but you're actually able to do this exact same function for a sub Xsheet without actually having to go into the sub Xsheet. There's also new conversion methods. So let me go ahead and show you what I mean. So here I open up the 1.1.3 Marevna edition once again. I create a vector level with a squiggly line, and from the level menu we can convert to vectors, and that's all the options we have available. But in the OTX version, if we access the level menu, we have convert to vectors, convert to toons raster, replace vectors with simplified rasters. So we now have two new options inside of the level menu. Keep in mind that if you're using any fills with your vector work and you convert it to a simplified raster level, all your fills will disappear because on basic raster levels there are no fills. Whereas if you convert it to a toons raster level, it will preserve the fills. Also, keep in mind that toons raster levels can't use the MyPaint brushes, so there are benefits and disadvantages to each level type. So in the past, without these new conversion methods in OpenToons, you'd have to select all of the levels, copy them, create a new level that's the level type that you need, then paste it in. So with these new options, we're able to take a 4-step process and reduce it down to a 1-step process. Now, you're not going to be able to see my fingers touching my touchscreen, but this is me on the 1.1.3 Marevna edition pinching my fingers on the screen, and all it's doing is making a squiggly line. And this is me rotating my two fingers on the screen, and all it's doing is creating a squiggly line on the screen once again. But if I go into the OTX version and I start pinching and reverse pinching on the screen, I'll start zooming in and zooming out of the screen. If I just touch and drag one finger across the screen, I'll start panning around the screen. And if I rotate two fingers on the screen, I'll start rotating the canvas. And if you press Alt-0, it makes the screen level and plumb. And I see myself as using this feature quite often in the future when this feature is actually released into the next GitHub version. Another thing that you'll notice is that at the bottom of the viewer, the icons have actually been updated, and they're looking pretty sleek. I'm really fond of the blue highlight that this new design has when you select something down there. Once again, we have the note level, and you'll be able to access that by right-clicking on a cell and clicking on New Level. Now, you won't be able to write in detailed information, but that's that's not what it's designed for. It's for really simple descriptions of things going on in your scene. In the past, I guess it's been a problem exporting soundtracks from OpenTunes. Now, I haven't really messed with sound in OpenTunes, not quite yet, but it's good to hear that there have been improvements made to that end. If you pull out the geometry tool in the 1.1.3 GitHub and Marevna editions, and you use the polyline version of the tool, you're able to draw things out much like the pen tool in Photoshop, but you'd always have to close the shape inside of the 1.1.3 versions. So if you don't want to have a closed shape, you'd need to use the cut tool, cut in two places, use the selection tool, select the unwanted area, and delete it. And that's something like a 6-step process just to make the desired shape that you want with the polyline tool. However, in OTX, you're able to just press the Enter key to finish drawing the shape with the polyline. Now, I did show this in my previous OTX video, but I don't feel as though I described it very well. So this is just making your desired shape in 2 steps. Now here I draw out a bunch of mouth shapes, and then I right click on the Xsheet and I click on Apply Lip Sync Data column, and it has all my phoneme levels that I created. I didn't create a full list, but I created a number of mouth shapes. And I can use these arrow buttons to decide which mouth shapes form which phonetic sound. And it appears that on the bottom you're able to save the lip sync data file and use it in Papagayo in order to get your lip syncing with a piece of audio pretty quickly. Now, again, I haven't really messed with sound in OpenTunes yet, and I haven't done lip syncing yet either. So forgive me if I don't know the specifics on how all of this particular feature happens to work and how it does what it does, but I'm sure that just with what I've described thus far, you can gather what needs to be done from this point forward. There are a few tutorials on YouTube about how to do lip syncing with Papagayo, so maybe you might be able to get what I just showed you and be able to watch those tutorials and figure out what needs to be done with this new adjustment. Now, if you right click onto the viewer, a drop down menu will appear and you'll be able to select vector guided drawing. This is really cool, especially when you turn the frame range on in OTX. You'll have a green X to represent where you actually started to draw a line. So this helps you when you're using the in-betweening functionality in the level strip, or when you're using the frame range option for the brush tool in OTX. Now here you see OTX crash several times, actually more than several times, because I keep clicking on an empty level strip. Some sort of glitch or something. I mean, this happens every time I click on an empty level strip. So here I decide to draw a character's nose, and I decide to work on making an animated head turn. I draw 2 frames and insert a bunch of new frames on the level strip by pressing Insert on the keyboard. I select all the levels and click in between. I then draw out the brow ridge, the forehead, and the back of the head in one stroke. I go to the bottom of the level strip and draw the approximate shape of the same portions of the face. I then draw his cheekbone through his nose, his lips, his chin, and jaw. I go to the last level and draw the same portions of the face while considering the shifting geometry. I pretty much do this with most of the facial features. I see this as a moderately effective way of roughing out an animation, and it's basically something that I would like to refine later if I were to use this inside of my workflow. You can see that with me just working in a hurry for the sake of saving you guys time, I managed to still make a moderately decent looking head turn. I continue drawing the head in a speed animation while using this workflow, and you're able to witness the results. It's not perfect, but it is pretty quick. With the brush tool, you can now use a snapping option, which is basically implementing some tape tool functionality to the brush, and it's improving the workflow of coloring your animation while using vector levels. This doesn't mean that I'm ready to use vectors for coloring my animations, but it is what it is. It's cool that this is something that's still being worked on. I do see it as something that needs to be worked on. If it can be improved, I want to see it improved. And this snapping option also works for the geometry tool and all its variously different forms. Now here you see me draw out a circle, and I'm able to use the Animate tool and just drag it around. You'll notice that the tool options, there are a series of values for the north, south, east, west, and the z-axis field, and they keep adjusting when you start dragging around this circle on the screen. Now in OTX you can just click and drag next to these values on the tool options in order to exclusively move objects either north or south, east or west, or in using the z-axis to bring objects closer or further away from the camera. One of the features that people have been requesting is the capability to flip the canvas. If you go to File, Keyboard, Shortcuts, and then type Flip under Visualization, you'll find flip horizontally and flip vertically. Now currently OTX doesn't have keyboard shortcuts for these two functions, so I go ahead and create my own keyboard shortcuts, and I managed to flip the canvas horizontally for the video. And although I was able to flip vertically before I was recording the video, I wasn't able to get the canvas to actually flip vertically while I was actually recording. I don't know why, but these features do exist in OpenToonz. They do appear to be working. Maybe I just needed to close down OTX and reboot it or something. But generally, I think you get the idea, and it does work. So here, I draw out another circle, and I go into the Animation tab and go into the Effects schematic. I add a bunch of effects, and I want to plug this one column into all of these effects. If you have a really complex scene with a number of columns all plugged into all sorts of different effects in the effects schematic, it can become rather unreadable. It gets way too complex and impossible to keep track of everything. So Turtletooth has added a new effects node that literally does nothing in terms of functionality, but it does make it easier for you to keep track of the effects schematic and keep it readable at all times. You can access this new node by right-clicking, going to Utility, and selecting Pass Through. Once again, the Pass Through node literally does nothing other than assisting you in making the effects schematic more readable, especially when working with more complex scenes, or especially cut out animations. Anyways, that pretty much concludes it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe, and if you guys didn't like it, please like, share, and subscribe anyways.